Hello, everybody, and welcome to the More Confidence with Lunaria Gaia podcast. I am your host, Lunaria Gaia, and it's been a little while since I've had a guest on the show, and I got to say, I'm pretty darn excited for this one. I actually reached out to this beautiful human a little while ago and, got lost in the DMs, and then magic happened and we connected, and so here we are. Please welcome to Luna's Lounge this morning, Proverbial Lounge, Ginelle Testa. She is a body image acceptance and celebration coach who has built a supportive community on Instagram. In the rare moments she isn't writing, you can find her thrifting eclectic attire, which I'm sure we'll be able to see for those actually watching the podcast on YouTube, playing in a recreational street hockey league, which I'm really curious to hear more about, and watering her many plants. She has a beautiful following on Instagram with 12,000 followers, and she will literally help you change your relationship to your body, food, and smashing that diet culture. Please welcome to Luna's Lounge for this morning, Ginelle Testa.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I know I felt so bad. I saw your message lost and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a great message. Why did I miss it? But sometimes it just happens in the DMs.
Well, yeah. And it's one of those things that the timing of the universe works really beautiful. It's
yeah,
like,
worked out.
We connected as we connected.
Yep, it worked out.
I love how this works, Ginelle, when, we are on other sides of the world. Whereabouts are you?
I live in Boston, so in the US.
Boston in the US. I live 5 hours south of Sydney, and we've never met before, not in real life, or certainly not even had a conversation other than the text. And yet we both have amazing art and plant life in our house.
Yes, love it. Oh, I love your plants.
I've just started getting into them, and I know that so many people listening and watching at home love their plants. I've only just started having them around the house, and every time I go to the shops, I'm like, one more plant. I can see what people are now talking about.
My partner's like, no more plants, Ginelle, please.
Just one more, but this one's so cute, and I don't have a plant like this one. And look at this pot.
Yeah, exactly.
There's worse addictions that we could have.
I agree. They're not that expensive. It's okay.
That's right. And they add more oxygen to your air. Like, they're really good for you. Really good for you. Unlike some of the, probably addictive qualities that you and I have both had in our life, an addiction to dieting, an addiction to making sure that we remain skinny to get our worth. I followed you for a while, and I know that, throughout your life, you've had very similar story like that, in the sense of like, I have to be skinny, I have to lose weight, that's my version. And you've been, I was going to say a victim, almost like a victim, or victimized by the diet culture that suggests that you need to be smaller in order to be valuable. Can you tell us a little bit about your story? How have you gotten here where you're now posting photos with you in a beautiful bikini in your gorgeous body with enough written on your belly?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, the reason why I got here is because I hated myself for so long, and then I got sick of it. My history is disordered eating throughout the whole thing. I had a history with anorexia when I was younger, where I just restricted everything that I ate. I tried to burn off every calorie that I had, and I really did a lot of damage to my body with laxatives and caffeine pills. That was brutal. And then it sort of developed into binge eating disorder, where I binged, and I didn't purge, but I tried to burn off calories, and I binged a lot, and I really hated myself, and I gained a lot of weight, and I was upset about it. And then I went to fat camp, and that was really destructive to my mental well-being and like even my physical well-being, losing like X amount of weight in 10 days. It was not healthy at all.
Can I just pause you for a moment there? Because in Australia, I've heard about fat camp in America through like Hollywood, through movies and stuff, but I didn't realize that it was an actual thing. Maybe I've never heard of it here in Australia, but I don't know if fat camp is, I've never known an Australian to go to a fat camp. So it's like, that's a legitimate thing.
It's a big thing. It was a big thing. So the camp that I went to actually got shut down 2 years ago. Thank God. They had camps. I think they had 7 across the US. It was the biggest one in the US. It was like on MTV and all of those things. It was called Camp Shane, and they had a bunch of lawsuits.
When you say Camp Shame, Shane.
No, Shane. It should be Camp Shane.
It may as well, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was terrible, and just did a lot of damage to me overall. And then I sort of moved into like orthorexia, where I was obsessed with healthy food. Like I was obsessed with eating as healthy as possible.
Clean.
yeah, clean eating with no care to like whether or not I was enjoying the food. Like my nutritionist put me on a diet that included fish and beans, and I don't like either of those things. And like I ate them because I thought they were good for me, you know,
Yeah.
and yeah, so that's sort of been my history of what's gone on. And throughout that whole period, I just thought that I had to be as small as possible in order to
Yeah.
be loved, in order to be lovable, worthy, enough.
Oh, you know, I take a sigh there because, you know, you're telling my story and you're telling so many people's stories here. And I think that that's why this work is so important and why I love what you're doing, because when we speak out about our stories, we get this validation, yes, but also this permission to go, right. So it's not just me who's convinced of this. And it and maybe I'm not crazy because, you know, maybe I just want to live my life. Maybe I just want to be okay with however I eat, and whether or not that decides to be healthy. I mean, I don't know about you, but after years of disordered eating, I eat well. I've always really kind of looked after myself. And there's no judgment either way. If people don't, you're still worthy if you eat like shit, you know, like it, or if you're unhealthy. I think that that's the thing. I often get a lot of slack, and I'm sure that you do as well, depending on, you know, the more popular you get, the more haters you get telling you that you're being unhealthy. Do you get that?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I got one yesterday that just was like, "You're gonna die at 35 or something." I don't know what that message was about, but yeah, I do get a lot of hate about that.
Because it's crazy, because all like people sit there and go, but it's unhealthy. And it's like, I'm not promoting health. You're not talking about physical health here, right? And since when did our worthiness depend on our health? You know, does that, and often I come back to these people if I'm feeling like cagey enough. Or like sometimes it's just block delete. Other times it's like, I wanna find out, because does the person with cancer not get to feel valuable? Does the person with a disability not get to feel valuable? Does the person, I've got type 1 diabetes, I will never be classified as healthy. No matter how thin I get, I will never be classified as healthy. So does that mean that worth is dependent on health? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Oh, it's very ableist.
Yes, and that somehow that we can, you know, you might know the statistics on this, but studies have shown recently that 70% of our body mass is determined on our genes. Like the size of our body is like 70% of that is determined on our genes. Like I'm not a, like I've been this weight and size. I want to say I've been a lot less than, but I tend to come back to this neutral ground and have done ever since I was 16. I'm now close to 40. I weigh the same amount that I did when I was 16 now.
There's that idea of the set point theory, right? In Health at Every Size, that like you have a range that your body is comfortable in, and like we can manipulate that range so much, but like our bodies want to come back to this, like the range that it's meant to be in.
Yeah, and with that kind of said, like for you, I know for myself that set point, when I'm believing diet culture, when I'm not feeling great about myself, I don't like that set point. I want it to be at least 10 kilos less than what it is, but my body seems to want to stay about where it is right now. How have you over your life, and I suppose over this journey, I appreciate that we're all works in progress, how do you manage that? How do you manage when your body set point is vastly different to the one that you want?
Sure. Well, I'd say I've made peace at this point with it. Not 100% all the time, but I also have, straight size privilege. I'm a size 12 in US, so it's not, I'm pretty average size, but I think I would be plus size if we look at the movie stars that all of us compare ourselves to, though, so
yes.
I don't know. I think I've made peace with it over the years. I just that I'm in the body that I'm in. It's not going to change. I'm the healthiest I've ever been in my entire life right now. And that's okay. I'm okay where I am.
And healthy in your mind as much as anything else.
Yes.
I get that, Ginelle. Some people will say about that kind of health thing. It's like if you're only looking at health from one dimension, if you're only sitting there going, well, physical health is the only determinant. So I've been not to say I've been thinner and I've been stronger than what I am now. that I was mentally extremely unwell. I hated myself. I had disordered eating and then an eating disorder. So it's like, well, if it's at the cost of mental health, is it really healthy?
That's the thing. Like my mental well-being is the best it's ever been. I mean, my physical health is pretty good. I'd say it's good, but like my mental health is really where it's at right now. It's so good. And it doesn't make you any less worthy if your mental health isn't good. I'm just saying right now, the space where I'm in right now, it's good.
And that's kind of been a result. What would you say has led you to that point? Years of, anorexia, orthorexia, binge eating, disordered eating, fat camps. I still want to, I'm going to come back to that because I'm curious more about what that means. And what that involves. How have you done what you've done? And as I said, I know it's a work in progress, but how are you here where you're so robustly healthy that more than you have any time before in your life?
I'd say it's like, it's not just like the cool thing about being in recovery for disordered eating or eating disorders is that like your life becomes so much more expansive and big, and there are so many more parts to it. So like I'm sober from alcohol and drugs. I've been sober for 8 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm part of like a relationship and sex 12-step program too, where I've been like sober in that program for 5 years. And like, so there's a lot of factors in my life where I'm just really taking good care of myself, and I go to therapy. I'm on the right medication. I have bipolar disorder, but I'm on the right medication for that. So I just feel like it's a variety of factors. And one of it is definitely the fact that I'm not spending so much time trying to shrink myself that I'm able to take care of all this stuff.
Oh, I cannot agree with you more. The amount of time and energy you get back, because my whole life was centered around getting smaller, getting thinner. So that was literally almost all my waking hours. Since kind of giving up dieting, for want of a better term, I speak a second language. I've learned how to play an instrument. I take drama classes. I've written a best-selling book. I've changed my life. Like since going, that thing, I have so much more space and energy. I look after myself. I do yoga daily. I meditate all the time. When there's so much more time, space, and energy to actually look after yourself when you're not obsessed with shrinking.
Yeah, and I actually have hobbies now. I didn't have hobbies before other than trying to exercise all the time and eat as little as possible.
And try not to attack the people around you because you're so angry that you haven't eaten.
Right. Oh my gosh, yes.
So that all those layers of feelings that we have around ourselves are so deep rooted, so deep rooted. What do you do on your body shame days? Because I presume, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, that there's still days or times or moments where you might get a whisper of the old thinking. Does that still happen for you?
Sure. I'm going to 5 weddings this year, and weddings seem to be a time where like I'm like, oh wow, I'm like one of the bigger people here, or like I don't look at like that person, and I have those moments of thinking where I just don't feel great about myself. But I remind myself like why I'm where I am. Like I'm here to celebrate this person. I'm not here to think about my body, and I remind myself like why I'm here, and then I start to think about like, oh, I'm really grateful that I get to be celebrating with this person. And again, like I expand. I go from like this really small thinking to being like, I'm here because I love this person and I'm okay. And like, I sort of like redirect the thinking away from my body, and then I become body neutral. I don't become like body positive in that moment, but I become more body neutral where I'm just not thinking about it.
You've said 2 very poignant things that I'm not sure that you know that you've said them, but you probably do. You said before about not shrinking. And then now you've just described expanding. And I think that there's something super valuable in that, because I would often say that not only does diet culture or societal beauty standards on women tell us to be small in size, it tells us to be small in being. That there's a shrinking, like be seen and not heard. I know that that's a children thing in the past, but women to not take up space, to not exist, to not celebrate, to not have opinions, to not put ourselves out there, to not literally take up space. And so if we're small in stature, we're also small in spirit. But what you're describing there, Ginelle, is expansion of your being, and not just shrinking what I'm hearing you saying is that you're talking about the expansion of yourself to take up more space, and not necessarily more space in the sense that I'm impeding on others, but taking up more space in your own being, that there's more to the world than just this body. I get to celebrate love. I get to be there with friends and family. I don't know if you recognize that that's something. Is that part of what you think about, that there's the shrinking and the expansion?
I guess I don't think so much about the expansion. I think that I'm not shrinking, but I don't think so much about the expansion. So I love that reframe. That's awesome.
Yeah, and you exactly said it. And it wasn't until you said the expansion piece that I thought, you've just said the antidote. The antidote for you at those points in times in the weddings is the antidote to the shrinking is expanding. You expand your awareness. You see what you're grateful about, and yeah, you expanded your view on that. So I think that's a phenomenal technique. I think that everybody could really get a lot of value out of that. When we find ourselves wanting to shrink in body, it's because we're not expanding out into the world. But as soon as we look up again and look out and look for what we can be grateful for, or look beyond our body, we will find, actually, at the very least, body neutrality.
Yeah, and a lot of days that's all I can ask for, honestly. Like, I'm not going to wake up every single morning and be like, I love my body. It's so great. I mean, sometimes I feel that way, but most of the time I'm just like, yeah, I live in this body and it's fine. It's doing a good job.
And I suppose coming to that conclusion for you, Ginelle, of kind of, in a way, and I don't want to minimize it, of like, it's my body, it's a vessel. It helps me to get from kind of A to B. Can you tell me about the thinking on a daily basis? Obviously that wasn't always the case for you. How did you change that? Obviously your therapies and that kind of stuff. Do you have any kind of like tips or tools, or what somebody might be able to do to help transform that for themselves?
Yeah, so I mean, I had kind of a unique experience in that I got a Health at Every Size, an intuitive eating nutritionist who helped me transform my relationship with food. But I don't think that's the only path. I think that even just pursuing intuitive eating can really be life-changing. And just like have neutrality with food and have more comfort with food, and more like listening to my hunger and fullness cues, all the things that include in intuitive eating. But also I think building community was my biggest thing. And just I've built this, like I said that when we first started working together, I said I built this beautiful Instagram community that's like full of body positive, body acceptance, body liberation, like all these amazing people. And I watch people of all sizes, shapes, and colors, be themselves. And I feel like that's given me permission to do the same for myself.
100%. And I say this to people all the time. If you're getting on your social media and you're leaving it feeling like crap about yourself, you need to curate better. Remove the people that make you feel like you're not enough, and include the people who make you feel amazing about you being you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly how I feel.
That term intuitive eating, that kind of modality, has been in my awareness for a little while now. I don't necessarily know a whole bunch about it, though it makes sense to me. I feel like my audience and your audience at home could use with a little bit more education around that. What's the premise? What is intuitive eating and health at any size?
Sure. So there's 10 principles of intuitive eating. I'm not going to be able to name all of them, but some of my favorite ones are like reject the food police. So those food rules that we put on ourselves, like I posted about this yesterday. I already ate a carb today, so I can't eat a second carb. It's like challenging those rules that we tell ourselves. I can't drink any juice that has sugar in it. Like those like silly rules that we've made up in our heads because of diet culture, like challenging those rules and like, well, what does that really mean? How do I feel when I drink juice? Like, do I actually feel bad, or is it just this rule that I've created? That's one aspect.
I love that. It's funny with the belief. I found one the other day, and I'm sure that you do the same thing, where I'm living my life as I usually do, and then I discover this belief. I was I was sitting in a supermarket just waiting for my mum to come out, and I watched a man leave the supermarket at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, and he was eating a Milky Way bar and like a chocolate bar. And I instantly thought in my head, the default belief came up and said to me in that moment, like, you can't be eating a Milky Way bar at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. How absurd. I looked at this guy eating a Milky Way at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And the first thought that came to my mind, like, how can you eat chocolate bar at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a weekday? And then I thought to myself, what the hell is that? Like, my body doesn't know it's 1 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. Like, why can't I eat a chocolate bar at 1 o'clock in the afternoon? And I recognized, Ginelle, that I still, or up until that point, have these rules. Like, I only drink soft drink on the weekends because I'm allowed to drink soft drink on the weekends, or I would only eat dessert on the weekend. Even if I feel like eating dessert during the week, I have these rules around what I'm allowed to eat. It's amazing. I can't believe how many we actually have.
Oh, it's so many. I just did a group coaching program. It was bikini body mindset. So it's like the idea that we have bikini bodies at any time, and it's a mindset, not an actual like state that you need to be in. And we were talking about food rules a lot this week, about how like we just have so many in the back of our heads that we don't even think about. They're not even conscious most of the time.
And that's the thing. I mean, have you found that doing this work and being in programs and getting coaches and that kind of stuff brings it to the surface? Have you found that, cool.
And I go, what is that? Like, I'll hear myself do that. You can't have, or you shouldn't. And I'm like, I'm able to go, what the heck is that about? And I just get curious about it.
Even someone, like, it was for someone else. Like, I thought the most absurd thing in the world that on a Tuesday afternoon, someone would be eating a Milky Way. like as if, I don't know, as if I was watching someone have a tequila shot at 9 a.m. Do you know what I mean? It was kind of like this rule around, why can't that person, and why can't I eat a chocolate bar at 1 o'clock in the afternoon if I so felt like on a weekday? My body doesn't know what day of the week it is.
Exactly. And I had this conversation with the client this week. One of her pieces of homework was to break 3 food rules. And one of them is like, she feels that she can't have breakfast at lunch or dinner, or vice versa. So I was like, you have breakfast at dinner, or you have lunch at breakfast, and just break that food rule.
That's so cool. So breaking, so in the work that you do, and part of it, obviously it was just this one conversation, but some of those food rules would be like, I can't eat a chocolate bar, or I can't drink soft drink on a weekday, or if I've already eaten carbs at a certain period of time, then I can't do it again. Like, I ate Chinese food last night, so I can't have hot chips today. Exactly. What other ones can you like think even for yourself? Like are there ones, because I think that there's rules that I have that I didn't even know exist.
I struggle with still, you can't have more than 1 sweet in a day. That I'm like, I can go ahead and have a bowl of ice cream. I don't feel bad about it, but I'm like, you can't have another bowl of ice cream. You're not allowed to have more than what you just ate. I struggle with that one still.
But you're allowed to have 2 servings of broccoli, right?
Oh yeah, you can have like 5 servings of broccoli. It doesn't make any sense. And I feel the way with cheese too. I'm like, you can't have mac and cheese twice, and it just doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't, does it? These very stringent rules around it. How have you found? Because it was really interesting for me when I developed type 1 diabetes, which is insulin dependent. My pancreas failed, so it's not a lifestyle; it's a disease that occurred as a result of my pancreas failing. There wasn't anything that I could do about it. It's genetic, right? And so I didn't develop that until I was in my mid-20s. Most type 1 diabetes is known as juvenile diabetes. Most little kids get it. So I was much later with developing that, but make no mistake, I am insulin dependent. Without it in 3 days, I'd be dead, right? So it's been a really interesting path to traverse, because at the peak of my bulimia, I had diabetes. And so I'm literally putting food in my mouth and purging while tracking what that's doing to my body via my finger pricking with my diabetes. I've had to, in many ways, control my food. It's very bizarre. It's like because of my health conditions, and you might find that if you're a celiac, you might find that for other reasons, there are kind of rules for me that are important. I don't typically eat carbohydrates, not because it's a diet, and it's been a really interesting thing for me. I don't typically eat them because it's harder for me to control my diabetes if I eat lots of carbohydrates and sugar, right? Yet I still do it, I think, for the very same reason. I appreciate that you're not a diabetic, and I presume you're not. You probably would have told me by now.
No.
Yeah. What kind of advice might you give to someone? And I know I'm putting you on the spot here, so you might not have anything, but let's just brainstorm. What kind of advice would you give to someone, maybe like me, who, for health reasons, I need to control my diet to a certain extent, but at the same time, I come from a history of eating disorders. Like, how do you think that like not a one answer solution? I know you don't have that, but do you have any advice about how someone might handle that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of nutritionists could talk about this better than me. And there are nutritionists like Health at Every Size and intuitive eating nutritionists on Instagram and on different platforms
Cool.
that I follow. And I think that they do a great job addressing this. I felt really fortunate that my intuitive eating person my nutritionist worked with people like this too. And she was able to help them navigate this, to think about the mindset that like, I'm not restricting because it's a diet. I'm restricting because this is helpful for me. Like trying to think of what's helpful rather than like what I can't eat, you know?
Yeah. Actually, that's a really good thing that you've said there. I mean, I think, going and looking at Health at Any Size nutritionists rather than you got to eat this thing nutritionists, I think that's super useful. And then the second thing that you said, that people would often say, like if someone offered me cake, for example, sometimes I eat cake, but I appreciate that I need way more medication to eat cake, right? So I would say no thanks, and they'll be like, oh, people, you know how people force food on you? Have you ever noticed that? Oh, come on, have the cake. And these days, I mean, I don't succumb to peer pressure anyway. I'm not like that these days. But sometimes I'll just say I'm a diabetic, and they'll say, oh, you can't eat cake, and I'll reframe it and say, no, I don't eat cake, because when I say I can't, that triggers old parts of me of like, I'm restricting myself. And I don't feel restricted anymore. I feel like it's freedom, because to me, I just don't eat cake. It's in the best interest of me and my health for me to not eat cake for the diabetes.
This is reminding me of, sorry to interrupt. This is reminding me of like my choices with, like, I love McDonald's, but if I eat 10 McNuggets, I usually feel sick. So I usually choose 6 McNuggets.
Yeah.
And like, it's not out of shame. It's not out of guilt. It's not out of, I can't have it. It's just my tummy feels better when I have 6 versus when I have 10.
And I love that. There's a sense of empowerment of that. Because when you give yourself full permission to eat or drink whatever you want, what have you found? Because I was just so restricted for so long. What have you found along the way of going, like when you couldn't eat nuggets at all, and then you might go on a binge, would you eat 10? Maybe you eat 20 nuggets, right?
Right. Well, one of the important things about intuitive eating is the final principle. The 10th principle is gentle nutrition, right? So it means that you do think about nutrition, and you do think about like, how am I going to feel when I eat this? I can eat like a pound of mac and cheese because it tastes good, but like, am I going to feel good afterwards? So it's like also asking yourself those questions too. It's not just about like what will taste good. It's also how will it feel in my body?
Yeah, and the after effects of that, right? I often talk about building a relationship with yourself. A lot of my work, there's body image throughout it, but I talk predominantly about confidence, about your relationship with yourself. Not saying holistically, but I talk spirituality. There's lots of different layers to that. Body image being kind of one component of it. And I'm sure you find the same thing. When you remember that it's not about your body, you actually get to just love yourself for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have this thing of like, I'm looking at my kitchen sink, and I can see that the dishes are done. And last night, I do this often. Last night, did I want to do the dishes? No. But did tomorrow me want the dishes done? Yes. So I made a deal with me, and I say, my future self kind of talks to me and says, Luna, could you do the dishes, please? I'd really love to wake up in the morning with a clean kitchen. And then present Luna says, yeah, my darling, of course. And sometimes it's in reverse. Tomorrow, Luna, I really don't want to do the dishes tonight. Could you do them in the morning for me, please? Yeah, of course, honey. And I feel like it's the same with the food. Like,
I love that.
Like,
it's coming from, I think it's the place that it's coming from. It's not shame and guilt and all of that. It's coming from a place of love and empowerment, like you said.
Future Ginelle, how are you going to feel if I eat 10 nuggets? And future Ginelle's like, please don't eat 10 nuggets. Like, I know if you want to eat 10 nuggets, I love you, do it. I'd feel so much better if we ate 6. And then you're like, let's have 6.
Exactly. That's so good. Yeah.
You know? That's yeah, it's curious. So I'm guessing that you don't prescribe to any food rules for you. Like there isn't anything that you're not allowed to eat or allowed to eat, or obviously you still think about nutrition. How scary was that in the beginning to kind of go from I need to watch everything that I need to eat to now I'm allowed to eat anything all of a sudden?
Terrifying. I binged for years. I really did. And I think that's important to think about. Like, what if you held your breath for a really long time and then you finally take air? What do? You gasp. So like, I think when I restricted for so long, it has taken me, I just feel like I had the final frontier with sweets. It's taken me 8 years to allow myself to eat Milanos, which are cookies, like they're mint cookies. And it's taken a really long time, but I've just had like little things here and there. Like I'm going to incorporate ice cream in my house. I'm going to incorporate cookies in my house. And I've like slowly but surely stopped binging on them.
Yeah, and how have you learned to trust yourself with that? I know that so many people, and myself included in the past, like if there's chips or cookies or Milanos, ice cream, if there's something in my house, then I'll eat it. If I don't buy it, then it's not there and I have to make myself go to the shop. So I'm putting an obstacle between that thing and that thing. How have you learned to trust yourself that you can eat 2 Milanos without eating 12 packets of them?
Honestly, like it was exposure therapy that I just started putting it in my house. And like I said, for a while I did binge on it. Honestly, it was, I think I like binged at first, but slowly I knew that I was allowed to have it. And I had this mindset change that like, it's not a forbidden fruit anymore. You know, it's in your cabinet. You can have it whenever you want, Ginelle. It's okay. And like, I had to slowly have this mindset change.
And I really like what you're saying there about that, about the breath, you know, that starvation. If you've been starving and it doesn't matter what food's put in front of you, you will eat it. And the reality is that when we've been on a diet, even if our body doesn't look like we're starving, it has been, you know, it has been restricted. I remember recently someone saying to me, you know, like a friend who's a fitness and wellness coach who I, you know, appreciate their opinion a lot. I have a lot of respect for them and we have a lot of aligned values. And she said to me, honey, I think you need to eat more. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, I just don't think that you're eating enough. Because after so many years, then I kind of went to binging, but now I'm kind of at a point where sometimes I couldn't be bothered. I live alone, right? So I don't cook for other people. It's just me. And I get a bit lazy with the food. I kind of couldn't be asked. So I was just having I call it a diet shake because that's how it's labeled as, but it's just to me a protein shake, right? I'm just having a protein shake in the morning. Lunchtime comes around. I couldn't be asked. I'll just have another protein shake because I wasn't making myself food, right? Which is not self-care, right? I appreciate that it's not self-care. It's going, oh, there's this thing that my body needs that I couldn't be bothered doing. That I couldn't be bothered dealing with. I found myself actually not eating enough food, despite my body still maybe being classified as overweight. I wasn't eating enough. And it's fascinating how much we can, those old habits of ignoring hunger signals. Like I didn't know that because I was napping every afternoon. I didn't know that the tiredness that I was feeling was the fact that I wasn't getting enough food.
And that's one of the wildest things about binging is that the reason why we binge is often because we restrict, or like the reason why we overeat is often because we're not eating enough. Yes. Which sounds like so backwards, right? It's like, what do you mean?
And why wouldn't we eat enough? You know, like that seems crazy because we're so calorie obsessed, right? Of there's a certain amount that you're meant to eat, and how can it possibly be the same for everybody?
Oh, it's not. Yeah, that makes me so upset when people like prescribe certain amounts of calories,
and then you have to stay within that. Look, I appreciate that for weight loss to occur in some ways, if you haven't done decades of damage to your metabolism, that you know a calorie deficit is required in order to make changes to the fat deposits on your body. I appreciate that that's a thing, but like that, it's like 1,200 calories a day is so low, it's crazy, huh?
But even like coming back to like the health at every size thing that we haven't talked that much about, I feel like it's healthier to just take healthy actions towards bettering yourself than like to focus on losing weight. You know,
Yeah.
like even if you are like in a high risk category with high cholesterol, like it's better to focus on including more fruits and veggies, or better to focus on like walking more than it is to laser focus on weight, you know, like that's what the health at
Yeah.
every size movement teaches. It's that anyone can take healthy actions at any size. Not that anyone's healthy at any size, but you can take those actions, you know?
You can improve your health at any size. And yeah, I like that. And I think that modality helps break the stigma that smaller necessarily means healthier.
Yes, absolutely.
I
Because yeah, thinness is equated with health always.
which is so bizarre because I don't know if I've ever met anybody on this entire planet who would say that they haven't met somebody who's as thin as a rake, but smokes, drinks, eat whatever that they want, and they never put on weight. Everybody knows somebody like that.
Yeah.
So is it such a stretch to think that somebody in a bigger body could not drink, not smoke, be healthy, exercise, and eat good food, and not be skinny? It's socially acceptable the other way around, but this way it seems to not for some reason.
I know it's wild. That's what part of the work that I do online is being like, you know, thin does not equal healthy, fat does not equal unhealthy. It's not automatic, you know. That's some of the language that I try to use a lot.
Yeah. So what are you doing now? How do you help people? How are you, obviously you do on your Instagram by being a beautiful role model and example. That is wonderful, and you're educating people. But in terms of somebody who wants to work with you, what do you do? What could they expect from working with you?
Sure. So I do one-on-one coaching and I do group coaching. My next group coaching won't be until September, but my one-on-one coaching is basically geared around whatever the person needs. But historically, I've done like intuitive eating coaching. So teaching them about intuitive eating, helping them integrate that into their lives, and the same with health at every size. We talk a lot about clothes because surprisingly, clothes have a lot to do with like how we think about ourselves, how we exist in the world. So clothes come up often.
Oh, tell me more about that. I'm sure that my listeners will, and yours as well, will want to hear about that. What do you mean?
Yeah, so I have a couple of my last clients all had like issues with the clothes that they're wearing. So for example, like one of them labels like those are my small clothes and those are my big clothes, and like I'm bad if I'm fitting in my
Yes.
big clothes. You know, I'm only good if I fit in my small clothes.
Yep. And holding on to your like skinny clothes. Yeah,
Yep.
like holding on to them and not letting go. One day I'm going to be thin enough to get into that again.
And then you just torture yourself. Like maybe if your weight fluctuates, fine, but like if you haven't been that weight in like 5 to 10 years, just let it go, or even a couple years, you know.
Yeah, because then you have this comparison rate that says that you're not good enough until you get back into that size. I remember the freedom that I found, and I've loved where the world has moved in the last, I want to say 3 or 4 years, because I don't even think it's been around for that long, Ginelle. I don't know if you've noticed the same thing, but like 10 years ago, body positivity wasn't a thing. There wasn't any plus size queens rocking it. I mean, 10 years ago, even on I was watching old videos of Australian Idol, and 10, 15 years ago, the judges were critiquing the women's bodies and saying, and like on national TV, and it was totally socially acceptable to say, you look too fat in that dress, don't wear it, on a singing competition, right? So it's only been in the most recent years where I've seen the difference in clothing brands that I can now shop in more straight size clothing stores. Now, again, I have an element of straight size privilege. I'm a 16 to 18 Australian, so that I think that's a 14 to 16 American probably. So I'm a little bit above what the average might be, but I can shop in your Kmart's and Big W's, and like I can shop in straight size stores. I'm probably at the back end, and they might not always fit me, but I'm in that kind of middle range where I'm almost too small to fit into the plus size stores, and I'm too big in the straight sized. I'm a mid-size, I think that's what they call it.
Sure.
But I've loved going into those kind of stores now, straight size stores, and seeing that they're going up to 18 and 20. And what that means is that I can wear clothes that fit me, that make me feel good, rather than me trying to squeeze into the 14 because that's the biggest size in the store. I can look really good in my 18 or 20 and rock on. And I'm noticing that in I don't know if you have it in America. Do you have a brand called City Chick?
No.
City Chick is a beautiful, really, really beautiful plus size clothing brand. The quality is gorgeous, and like they go up to a size 30. You know, like the clothing is built for the bottom of like the top of mid range to plus, right? And it means that women can wear beautiful clothes that aren't just moo-moos. Because when I was younger, I don't know what it was like for you, but I couldn't get clothes that fitted me beautifully back then. It sucked.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I know. I'm so grateful that they're expanding their sizes. Though I heard a story about Old Navy recently. I don't know if you guys have Old Navy, but they like are hiding their plus size options. They're not putting them out in the front of the store. They're in the back. You have to ask for them, which is like,
oh my gosh,
embarrassing for people to like go out.
Yeah. Do you
have to go out of their way to ask? Like, why aren't they out?
And I mean, I kind of don't understand the why a brand would care. I saw someone, maybe do you follow Kenzie Brenner?
Yeah.
Brenner, yeah. I think she posted something the other day, or it actually could have been someone more locally. They said, if you're a brand who won't stock plus size, but you're stocking oversize, because oversize is in fashion right now. So like really big clothes on small people. And I'm like, she's like, if you are a brand who does that, like almost up yours, because and literally I went into my Kmart the other day and I was looking for a sweater, just some knit jumpers. And as I said, I'm a size 16 to 18. I bought a size 8 because they're meant to be oversized. I just wanted it regularly fit. And now I'm buying a size 8 and I'm like, hang on a second here. It just goes to show how made up the clothing sizes are.
They so are. I tried on something yesterday that was supposed to be on the higher end of my size, and I almost ripped it in half. And I just don't understand the sizes sometimes.
And so it is the same in the States, that you just find that there is very little consistency and continuity of sizing.
Absolutely.
And that messes with our heads, do you think? Like when in one brand I'm a size 12, I'm like, oh my God, look how important I am, a size 12. And then another brand I'm an 18 and thinking, I'm the biggest, worst person in the world. How do you reckon it impacts us?
Yeah, I mean, that's where we have to try to, I mean, it's easier for me to say being a smaller size, but I feel like it's hard. Like I try not to put weight on that, you know, like it doesn't matter what size I am, you know, it matters, do the clothes fit me or not?
That's it. It's such an important piece because I feel like I saw a post of yours the other day. Your body has changed significantly over the years from when you were disordered eating to now. Is that fair to say? Like in terms of you wear a bigger size now than you were before?
Much bigger.
Yeah. How did you kind of like overcome that of like, I should be a size 8, but now I'm a 12? Even though it's arbitrary and it's just completely made up. And we know logically that it doesn't mean anything, but it would have at the time, right?
Oh, it would have totally meant something at the time. I mean, I remember being at fat camp, like looking at the size of my pants and just desperately hoping that I could fit into something smaller. And now I don't think that way anymore. I mean, once in a while I'll be like, oh, I really wish I looked like that girl. And then that girl tells me she doesn't eat croissants. And I'm like, never mind. I don't want to look like that girl. That really happened.
I remember there once being someone told me something, and many years ago I had it on my fridge, and it was a Kate Moss quote that says, nothing tastes as good as skinny feels.
Oh yeah.
Like, no, I'm with you. The croissant is delicious. Actually, that does taste. It tastes better. It tastes way better than skinny feels.
Exactly. So I guess that's where I'm at now. It's like, I'll keep my like croissants, you know, I'm good with them. I'm good with my body being a little bit bigger than it was, and it's okay. And if my body got bigger, that's okay too. You know, I'm taking care of it.
Because my mum often says, she goes, you're a long time dead. If she wants to have the second cookie, she'll say you're a long time dead, right? And she's fit and she's active and she's healthy and she does the stuff, but she's not going to restrict herself from having the cookie because you're here living life. Do you really want to get to your deathbed and go, I died as a size 10. I was miserable, but gosh, I got skinny in the end. Like, who cares?
I've seen so many quotes that are like, I do not want to get to the end of my life being like, wow, I wasted so much time worrying about whether or not my thighs jiggled. Like, why did I spend so much time thinking about that when I could have lived my life?
Yeah, I could have gone after my dreams, my passions. I could have done that thing and learnt that language that I wanted to learn. I could have done so many things, but geez, I'm glad I didn't eat that croissant.
No, thank you. That's not the life I want to live.
No, and I think that comes to that choice, doesn't it? I often talk about this in my work, particularly with my clients. I talk about at some point you're going to have to make a choice that what life do you want to live? Do you want to live in the diet culture mindset that tells you that you can't be happy until you're thin? Or do you just want to go about being happy now?
Yeah, that food freedom, body freedom, that's what I choose.
Yeah. Do you find, and I often talk about this, I find that I need to keep making the choice.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so that's the same thing, you know. I think some people think, oh my God, they might look at someone like you and I and go, they made it. You know, they never have a bad day, or that they never have to come up against diet culture. But we keep making the choice, right?
I recently had a coworker talk about how toast is an empty carb, and I had to sit there and be like, am I going to engage in this conversation? I'm not going to engage in this conversation. It's not even worth it, and I'm not going there again. And I had to, and I just, yeah. So I actively make that choice every day where I'm like, I'm not going back there. I refuse.
Yeah. Yeah. And keep making that choice of, it's not who I am. I don't believe in it anymore. It's not in my best interest to follow that path anymore.
No, it's really not. I'm choosing this path.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's so wonderfully liberating. I know that I mentioned it before, and I do want to briefly touch on it. Tell me about the damaging effects that things like fat camp had on you.
Yeah, well, I mean, just thinking that like I'm not going to be good enough. Like, for example, I was in a relationship at the time and I did not believe that this person loved me because I thought that I was not lovable because of my body size.
Yeah.
So I went to fat camp thinking that maybe if I came back from fat camp, I would be lovable enough. So like just thinking that like my worth as a human being depends on my success at a fat camp.
Yeah.
Like that's awful. And I had a friend come back, not a friend, an old friend when I came back, she said, oh, Ginelle failed fat camp. She didn't lose enough weight. And that like rung in my head for so long. Like I even failed fat camp.
Yeah. And so then it becomes the link between there's an identity attached to it. People have often said to me, oh, I know I really love myself. I just hate my body. And I'm like, yeah, let's try that on for size for a second. Pardon the pun. I'm like, let's try that on for a second. So when you tell yourself that you hate your body, tell me the kind of things that you say. And they go, well, you know, I say that I'm fat, and I say that I'm a piece of shit, and I say that I'm worthless. I'm like, okay. So you're saying I'm worthless. You're saying I'm not enough. You're saying that I'm unworthy. Are you talking about your body right now? They're like, well, I'm kind of, yeah. I'm like, you're talking about you. You can't separate the you that is your body and the you that is you when you're speaking in those kind of languages. You failed fat camp, therefore you're a failure, right? Like that's what you made that mean at the time.
It comes down to fundamental worth. You know, like I fundamentally think that I'm broken and unlovable. And it has something to do with my body, but it also is like me as a human being, you know, just what you're saying.
And so I love hearing this other perspective as well from someone else's point of view to whom we haven't had a conversation about this. Is it fair to say, is it the truth that you know in your journey that your worth has nothing to do with your productivity, your relationship status, your money, your body? Your worth has nothing to do with anything on the outside. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I, even more so than body stuff, I have to come back to every day. Like productivity still gets me sometimes, you know, I'm like, because I work in a capitalistic society and, you know, I work for a tech startup that's very busy. And like, sometimes I'm like, if I'm not producing, I don't deserve to be here. And like, that's something that I have to work through every day.
Yeah. And reminding ourselves, and I think that's a beautiful sort of tie to this, that I just want everybody to know that you're inherently worthy. You are inherently valuable. You were born that way and you will die that way. You can't do anything that takes away your worth. You not doing or doing something, you're worthy no matter what. And the way that I always describe that, Ginelle, is that, can you tell me, and I'm going to play it out with you in real life time here. Can you name any baby that is unworthy?
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and I think of like little Ginelle too, like my childhood Ginelle. Like, would I ever tell her all the things that I sometimes say to myself in the back of my mind?
Yeah, because you can't tell me any baby that's unworthy, right?
Oh,
And okay, so think about a baby. Is there any child that's unworthy?
no.
So then, this is what I often talk about in my workshops. So then tell me, Ginelle, were you always an adult, or was at some point you were a baby?
I was at some point a baby.
Okay, so when did you grow out of being worthy then?
Yeah, I can't answer that, I guess, when adulthood, diet culture, capitalism, all of the above hit me.
And did that change your actual worth, or
No.
did it just change your perceived worth?
Yeah, definitely just my perceived worth.
And that in and of itself, to remember that we were born worthy and you can't grow out of that. It's inherent. You can't stop being worthy. We think that we're not, we're perceived not, and reminding ourselves, and I'm the same, reminding myself of that. If I'm, my business or productivity is a big one. I agree with you. Productivity in this capitalistic world of, well, how much money have you made this month? Or how much output have you done? I'm like, I'm just as worthy lying on the couch having a nap as I am speaking on a stage of hundreds of people. I'm just as worthy. Nothing can change it.
Yeah, don't even get me started on how important rest is,
So very, very important. We need to look after ourselves in all different shapes and forms and all that jazz. Yeah. Ginelle, it's been beautiful speaking with you. Thank you so much for coming on the More Confidence with Lunaria Gaia podcast. I know that so many of your followers, so many of my followers are going to get an immense amount of value from this conversation. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, this was amazing. I've had so much fun talking to you.
Yeah, it's been great. Is there any last piece of advice? If you could leave one droplet of wisdom, that I'm putting you on the spot here, one droplet of wisdom to leave for everybody listening and watching at home, what might you say to everybody?
We've sort of talked about it already, we've definitely talked about it already, but I think community is so important. Just the people that you surround yourself with, maybe in real life too, like maybe spend less time with family that's judgmental and critical and more time with your friends that are accepting and loving, and like curate that Instagram or social media feed that you have, curate it so that you feel good when you're on it. And yeah, I would just say, like, watch the people that you surround yourself with and all, online and in real life.
I couldn't agree more. You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And if people are judgmental, then you're more likely to be. And if people are, making you feel like crap, you'll feel like crap. So curate your people in all aspects, in real life and online as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
How can we find you, my dear? If we want to work with you, if we want to support you, if we want to follow you, how can we find you?
Sure. Instagram is the best place to go. It's GINELLETESTA. So it's Ginelle Testa on Instagram. And then the same as my website, GinelleTesta.com, if you want to work with me. But that link is on my Instagram as well.
Beautiful. And I'll put everything in the bio anyway. So for those of you who are curious, just go check out the bio in the Spotify, in the YouTube, wherever you're watching this in the land. Just go ahead and check out the details below in the description, and you will find all the contacts to go hang out with this beautiful human. I highly, highly recommend it. Please follow her on Instagram. I think that this community that she's created is absolutely phenomenal. And it has been a wonderful pleasure to have you here on the show today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.